does the budget betray working people? Yesterday, Rachel Reeves unveiled Labour's first budget in 14 years. Now, she started by saying that the country's finances were left in a dire situation.
Opposite failed our country. Yeah. Their austerity broke our National Health Service. Yeah. Their Brexit deal harmed British businesses. Yeah. And their mini-budget left families paying the price with higher mortgages. The British people have inherited their failure. Yeah.
Reeves then set out £40 billion worth of tax rises. Good news that there were no increases in national insurance, income tax and VAT. However, she had to make some difficult choices. Have a listen. Oh, we'll get that clip in a minute. Businesses will feel the strain, but do you think that there will be a knock-on effect? That's what we're asking. Get those calls in now, 0207 862 2222. Jemma, are working people being betrayed by this budget?
Overall, I don't think so. I think obviously there's so much nuance. I think that this is a thought-out, considered budget for the start, so the markets haven't reacted so diabolically as they did when Liz Truss everything was uncosted. I'm very pleased about the investment that is being planned and the spending. We need it. Nothing works, and it's about time that money was ploughed into getting this country going. That is fantastic. How she has acquired it and the tax decisions that she's made, I agree with some of them. I do have question marks over the NI for employers. I would have preferred her, I've said this a million times, to have done a wealth tax on people with £10 million worth of assets. That could have created £24 billion. So I wish she'd gone further in many ways. I personally think, perhaps reversing the winter fuel allowance decision, getting rid of the two-child benefit cap. But I think overall she didn't betray working people. She stuck to what she said in the manifesto. We will all have a bit of fiscal drag, but that was a Tory decision. So again, she has said that at some point that's going to not be frozen anymore. But for the meantime, we're still going to be sort of experiencing pretty high taxes, but it's not going to change massively. But the businesses that are going to be clobbered, they are going to have to pass that on somehow. And that could then affect working people.
Well, yeah, I mean, is that going to have a knock-on effect, do you think, Tim?
I think it's going to have a huge effect. And look, what I'd say is Jemma is positive largely about the budget, and I understand why she's positive about it. The extra investment in capital, the extra investment in the National Health Service, etc., etc. But it wasn't what they said they were going to do in the manifesto. That's the big thing. If Labour had gone to the election and said, all of our public services need an awful lot more money, we need to spend big on roads, on AI, and we're going to put up your taxes by £40 billion. They didn't say that. They said so many times that they wouldn't raise taxes. Now, they, of course, are hiding behind this idea that the Tories left a black hole. Well, the OBR, this independent body that examines the public finances, didn't back them up on that at all yesterday. Perhaps said that there was a £9 billion grey area, but certainly nothing like £40 billion.
I think
the shame is, the shame is, perhaps we want this. Perhaps this is what the British people want. Perhaps it's, as Jemma argues, what the public services need. But it was never told to us before the election. And when we already have a trust problem with our politics, we've got a bigger one today. OK,
so for you specifically, is your problem the budget as she has laid it out, or is your problem that you don't believe it is in line with what they said they were going to do in the manifesto?
Both. Look.
So what's your problem with the budget? Forgetting the fact that you think it's a U-turn on their manifesto, why do you think their budget is going to be so bad, and who do you think specifically is going to get clobbered?
The best way of fighting poverty is a job. If people have work, they can, look after their own family, they can begin to, afford a home, etc. If you haven't got work, everything becomes more difficult. And so that increase in national insurance that employers will pay, sure, it's not going to appear in our pay packets, but you hinted at it, Jemma. Employers now, they've got a decision. Do they employ an extra person, or actually instead, because now employing someone is so expensive, do you buy equipment that could replace that person? Like in McDonald's, more automation in the kitchen or something. And the problem is, it'll take a little while, but I think what the government has done yesterday is tip the balance of decision for an employer from employing real people to actually trying to substitute for people. And there'll be less jobs in the future because of what the government's done.
So really sped up the process of AI sort of coming in.
And all of that,
they have raised the minimum wage, which I think is good. They're also going to make it so that if an 18-year-old is doing the same job as a 60-year-old, they get paid that same minimum wage, which I think makes sense. There were other uncosted things in the budget. They had put nothing aside, the Tories, for things like the compensation to the blood scandal victims. The post office scandal, they hadn't budgeted for that. I mean, that is devious at best. So there was an awful lot that she's having to deal with. Personally, am I pro all of it? No. As I say, I think it should go much further in a different way. I would have clobbered people with £10 million worth of assets because I don't think they would have felt that small increase. I really, really don't. And also, there was nothing in here for the climate, particularly, which I think is reprehensible when you look across to Spain and what is coming our way. So I do have problems with it, but I think the investment that she's planning is a good start. There has been criticism of the investment, though, and the fact that there is an increased spending for our services, education, NHS, all of that. But actually, when you look past 2028, 2030, it falls off a cliff and there doesn't seem to be much after that. And that's been one criticism of the budget. But let's focus in on...
I'll tell you what's coming after that. More taxes.
Well,
you can't suddenly increase all this spending and then let it go back. They are addicted to tax, the Labour Party. This is the beginning of a biggest increase in tax in British history.
If you want to spend, you have to find the money somewhere. Where would you get the money from? This idea about trickle down has been proven wrong. And the worst damage to this country, in my opinion, two things: austerity, utterly false economy. It's just wrecked everything and left us with, problems within the police service, problems within our schools, etc., etc. And the second one is Brexit. If we hadn't Brexited, which I know you supported, we wouldn't have a black hole in the first place.
I'm happy to talk about Brexit any time, but just on the topic for today...
Well, it's linked.
Everything is linked.
The big black hole in our finances.
The problem with your basic argument with spend, tax, is our money being spent well already?
It hasn't been.
And there's a story this morning of people in train drivers who've just had a big pay rise, still using fax machines. And that's, a particularly obvious example of just how our public services, they're from another era. And until we bring them into the 21st century, they will not spend money wisely.
That's not the train drivers' fault.
Well, it is. They are objecting to fax machines being removed. Train drivers are.
They do need to remove fax machines.
And also we have to see, we have to probably give Labour a little bit of time to find out how they are going to spend the money and whether they're going to spend this sort of investment appropriately. Maybe they will get rid of the fax machines, who knows. Bernard from Norwich, what's your view on this one? Do you think that this budget has clobbered the working man?
What could this government have done? Let me explain something to you to start with.
Please do.
I've been diagnosed with leukemia. My wife has got heart problems. We have lost the winter allowance because I do not fit 6 carries of to get the winter allowance. I've lost £750 altogether. But we just got to get on with it. We're not rich people. We've got over 16,000 in the bank, what we work hard to do and save, and we've been penalised. So the lady in the middle, she's brilliant, but the gentleman on the other side,
Jemma and
I
Tim.
don't know what world he live in.
So you are in agreement then with what Labour has done, even getting rid of the winter fuel payment?
Well, I know a lot of people out there who laugh about it, get £500 and they got more money than they need.
Yes, but there'll be lots of older people potentially that are incredibly vulnerable that should be applying for pension credits that aren't, and they will be having to choose between heating and eating this winter, and that's not a situation we want to be in.
Pardon? Well, the country's in such a state. If you live in the real world, we're in a bad way, and I'm sorry to say, how have we got to change it? Where's the money coming from?
I hear what you say. You think that actually Labour's had to make some tough decisions, and even though it's affected you personally, you can see that these tough decisions, I suppose, had to be made. I wonder whether you think, you agree with Jemma, that actually a better way of doing this might have been a wealth tax, which was actually a Green policy in their manifesto, but whether you think that would have been a fairer way of doing this rather than clobbering the employer, the wealth generators, some would call them, or the working man?
I mean, you've got to remember that the ordinary working people can't afford accountants.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. But basically, I think what Bernard's trying to say is that very, very wealthy have access to accountants who can help them find loopholes and so on, which is why they get actually a lower tax rate than just normal working professionals,
The
which to me isn't fair.
The vast majority of income tax is actually paid by top earners. And look, we all would rather other people pay tax than we pay tax. So we want to get the rich to pay. But the surveys at the moment that
we
show
want them to get their fair amount.
Let me finish, please. Let me finish. There are surveys out at the moment that show that more people at the top end of the income spectrum are thinking of leaving this country than ever before. Now, if they leave, they take jobs with them, they take investment, they take employment with them. It's that fable about, the golden goose that lays the golden eggs. At some point, if you kill that goose, we all are lost and we all are harmed by it.
OK, Bernard, thank you very much for your call. I know you'd have something to say to that, Joe. I just want to get more calls out. Lorraine from Manchester, what's your view on the budget? Do you think it's hammered the working person?
I do, very much so.
In what way? Because it's not directly.
No, I have a nephew who's worked hard all his life. He has a mortgage, and because she's hit the small businesses, he could be unemployed by Christmas.
I mean, that's hard to take. I think a lot of people might be feeling that at the moment. Is there any solace that if he isn't unemployed and he remains employed, that actually employers' rights might be improving under Labour, minimum wage is improving under Labour? Are these things that he can find solace in?
I'm not too sure. Time will tell.
Do you think there might be a few people like that, Jemma, out there that are thinking they work for smaller businesses and actually their employers are already struggling to employ them?
Yeah, I mean, I phoned a friend of mine who has a certain business. She actually only has 3 full-time employees and the rest of it doesn't apply to her. So there are, thresholds. I absolutely think there'll be, for instance, let's take hairdressers. OK, so sort of fairly small businesses that run themselves, where are they going to pass on that cost? And they'll be crunching numbers today and trying to work it out, because the other thing that happens with a budget is everybody has to work out how this applies to them. So I think we have to let the dust settle a bit. I absolutely think it's going to be problematic for some businesses. Yeah. It is.
Actually, if you're talking about hairdressers, there's an obvious knock-on effect there. Haircuts are going to get more expensive.
Well, that's it.
So we're already suffering from a cost of living crisis, and actually, as well as, unfortunately, your nephew potentially losing his job. I really hope, Lorraine, that doesn't happen.
If Gemma's going to talk about hairdressers, can I talk about pubs?
Oh, yes. Well, but pubs have done all right. Draft beer is getting a tax relief.
1p coming off the pint was announced. But I was talking to a pub landlord who said he'd been through the national insurance cost increases, various inflation cost increases. The OBR, for example, thinks inflation will now fall less quickly. And he put up all his calculations. He reckons he'll actually have to put 30p more on a pint to pay for all the other costs. So
break even.
The 1p was announced as a cut, but he thinks his pint will go up 40p on average to pay for the increased cost. So Gemma's completely right. We have to wait for the dust to settle, to get those famous accountants working the numbers, because sometimes, this is a shocking thing I'm about to say, but politicians, when they do budget, don't tell you the whole truth. It takes a few days for us to actually realise what the implications are. And I think in a few days' time, we will realise actually this budget has all sorts of hidden costs and penalties that will hurt all of us.
And potentially unintended consequences.
I think there's some things that won't affect most of us. Things like putting up the tax on private jets. Good. There are certain things, but like I say, I find it more problematic that there's not more looking at the climate issue that
there's one. The private jets is.
Yeah, is a little bit. But I don't know. There's so many more things where they could have gone further. But in terms of her being truthful, I have a problem with that as somebody who supported this last lot. Come on. Like, from Johnson onwards, those lies and fabrications that were told. And we have to sort of, it's not perfect. It's massively imperfect, but it's not catastrophic, and it's not based on sand. I think she has got the foundations, and at least it's been checked by the OBR, and at least we can see the transparency of the forecast, and not all of it is glowing reviews. But I think we're in a more sensible place than we've been in a long time.
Well, you say it's not catastrophic. It may not be catastrophic for the economy in general, but for that individual that may not have a job by Christmas, that is catastrophic.
It's hypothetical at the moment, and I hope he does, but we'll have to see.
Lorna from Surrey, what's your view on this?
Well, I personally don't agree with, your woman's budget at all. I feel it's very tough.
Rachel or Jemma? When you say a woman, I'm not sure. Rachel Reeves, are you talking about that?
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
That's all right. That's all right.
I don't like her budget. It's going to affect a lot of people, especially where you have got companies who are being charged double. That means that they will potentially have to cut jobs.
Yep.
And cut pay rises, etc. And that is not good. I'm thinking of disabilities as well, the veterans and the elderly. They, even if their wee amounts of their money was just slightly over, that's all taken off them, and they don't get the winter court payment, which I'm quite annoyed about, especially when I think of the veterans, because they gave their lives for us.
Lorna, I think we're getting into slightly different territory. I mean, you're talking about the budget, absolutely, but when we're talking about winter fuel payments, that's slightly different. What do you think about the fact that they focused on taxing employers rather than employees? I mean, before the budget announcement, maybe last year, we heard a lot from people wanting to tax big business, tax businesses, tax the bosses. The bosses are getting far more money than the workers are. And now we have a party that's come in that said, OK, we're going to increase the minimum wage. We're going to tax businesses. And we're worried now.
Okay, so basically what I feel about there is that they are, the extra tax they're going to have to pay. You're going to have a lot of people fleeing the country. Bye-bye,
That's what Tim would say.
Farmer. And I also feel very strongly that then that's going to hit the middle people who are left. They're going to be landed with the big bills like they were before.
Middle classes.
When I was living in Belfast, they did this then, and the country was absolutely broke. We don't need that. We've got so many people unemployed. So they need to think about how they're going to manage that properly. But I'm not happy with her at all. OK,
Lorna, thank you very much for your call. You had your hand up there, Jemma. What
like
would you like
in
to
school.
say? At the corner of my eye, I thought.
Firstly, we still have an overall lower tax percentage of our GDP than a lot of other European countries. And if you look at Spain, for instance, recently their growth is really, really climbing up, and they have spent so much on getting their infrastructure fantastic. There's a lot that we could look to there and think they're getting that right. This idea about everybody fleeing the country, I think, is a little over-egged.
Not everybody.
Yeah, it's a bit silly because, OK, some people, who are multi-millionaires might have the wherewithal to be able to do that, and they've already got money offshore and properties offshore and all the money. Most of us have our family here, have our friends here, have our lives here. You're British, you like living in Britain. Where are you going to go? Yeah, Brexit's actually stopped you being able to just pop over to Europe and live there anyway. You can do 82 days. And, weirdly, I was speaking to somebody who does have a very, very wealthy relative, and they were just like, no matter what flavour of government, we're going to take a hit, But actually, we love the schools here. We love this, we love that. We've got our friends.
Unfortunately, we've got one person staying, but the surveys overall show lots of people are thinking of leaving.
If you're that greedy, and there was another story about... Anyway, if you want to go and lie in Monaco until you turn, orange, doing what?
Which doesn't sound too bad, actually, when you put it like that. Martin from Lincolnshire, with no pals. Martin from Lincolnshire, what's your view on this one?
Morning. Well, she's not... counted working farmers as workers because yesterday's budget has dealt a death blow to the average family farm.
And this is about inheritance tax?
Yes, a 100-acre farm doesn't support a family nowadays, and yet anything bigger than that will have to be sold when a family member dies to pay the new taxes. So working farmers don't count anymore.
But Martin, some people say maybe that's more fair. That'll give other people the opportunity to get into the agricultural sector, and it won't just be passed on from father to son as it traditionally was.
Well, she sent a tax battleship through family farms who feed the nation and are the backbone of rural communities. That's generations of work, thrift, enterprise and family values just gone. Yeah,
I really sympathise with that. I think absolutely 100%. And I think farming is generational. And I think that's incredibly sad. And that was a mistake.
So, Martin, what would you have liked to hear from Rachel Reeves? Where would you like her to have picked up the tax from?
Well, I think what she was probably aiming for were the big industrialists. There's one, I won't mention his name, but he's a vacuum cleaner manufacturer who's bought a lot of Lincolnshire. to hide his wealth from the taxman. So she's gone after those sort of people, but she's dropped it right down to the 100-acre farmer. So she's set the bar way too low.
I've got you. So it's maybe going back to the winter fuel payments, that maybe the policy is not too bad, but it's just where we're setting the bar is the problem. Martin, that's really interesting. I know you want to come back in, Tim. You can have more to say after the break. I'm going to have to take a break now. Thank you for all your calls on this.